advisor to Senator Harry Reid, knows the state of Nevada well, and Dave Wasserman, House editor of the Cook Political Report. Dave, I want to talk about one of the most fascinating things we see emerging is this difference between the president's performance and other Republicans' performance. I mean, the Republican Party that was not Donald Trump had a pretty good night. House candidates had a very good night. Senate candidates had a pretty decent night, given the field. And Donald Trump is going to lose the national popular vote by probably 5 million votes. How do you understand those different results?
Well, first of all, he's going to lose the popular vote by more than 5 million. We're looking at potentially a popular vote margin when all is said and done between 4 and 5 points, which which is a lot better for Biden than it looked initially on election night. Look, I disagree with your earlier observation that Trump might have been an anchor for down ballot Republicans. In fact, if there was a blind spot that we analysts had looking at the down ballot races, it might have been that Donald Trump is the best of both worlds for congressional Republicans, because not only does he drive out low propensity voters who are Republicans, but he also gives independent voters an opportunity when he's on the ticket to vent their anger at Trump at the top of the ballot and then cross over and vote for a Republican they might not mind lower level. And that, I think, saved a lot of suburban districts that otherwise might have been in jeopardy on the trajectory we saw from 2018.
This is such a great point. Just to zoom in on that, and thank you for making that clarification. So you're a sort of lifelong Republican suburban voter who just can't handle Donald Trump. You hate him. And you go out in 2018, Trump's not on the ticket, you vote for the Democrat to send a signal. You come back in 2020, you could just vote against Donald Trump and then say, I'm a little worried about the Democrats. I want to sort of balance that and vote and split my ticket. That's what you're saying. There's some pool of voters that did that this time around, and it's pretty significant for those House races.
Yeah, when we calculate the crossover districts, the districts that voted one way for president and another way down ballot, I suspect we're going to see an awful lot of suburban districts that voted narrowly for Biden and also voted for a Republican member of Congress. But look, there's no question that part of Democrats' big problem in the House, the reason why their majority is likely to get cut in half probably, is that catastrophic loss of support among Hispanic voters. Yeah. Democrats have to take a look in the mirror in places like South Texas and in Miami, because they absolutely got crushed when it came to the margin swing. And let's face it, the Democratic Party today is really pretty out of touch with these voters.
Yeah, Maria, what do you think about that as someone who has worked in this space and worked in Nevada politics, obviously, when you look at what has happened in this election, particularly with Latino voters?
Yeah, I think specifically to that point, it might be an oversimplification. I do agree that we need to get in there, look at the precinct level, and really see what happened in those places you just mentioned. But I do think when you look at places like Nevada, like Arizona, like Georgia, like PA, you're going to see a community that looks unique and that is going to be really important to the margin. I was on the ground in Nevada for Senator Reid's 2010 reelect. It was a referendum on the anti-immigrant sentiment. When you look at what happened in Arizona, over the last 10 years, movements there have been building what you're seeing happening what you're seeing happening now, right? You're seeing movements like Lucha and Mi Gente who built power because Joe Arpaio was targeting them, and they're doing the #1 job, which is trying to get Donald Trump fired. So I just want to point out that, only focusing on South Florida or South Texas oversimplifies a part of the electorate that has a lot of nuance, that based on where they are regionally in the country. For example, in Arizona and Nevada, Latinos have much more of an immigrant identity. They have much more of a working class identity. And so you're going to see them deliver for Joe Biden in those states. So I just want to make sure we're unpacking that a little more, because it could create some really unfair takes around the coalition.
Well, let me ask what your 10,000-foot view of the coalition is. I mean, this election result, I think people's perception of the election result, especially among Democrats, is heavily influenced by the way it's rolled out. And I think that if all the votes have been counted, every vote in the country had been counted on election night, it would have just been a very different emotional experience for what is, I think we can safely say, the majority of Americans that voted against Donald Trump. What is your sort of view of what we're seeing come into focus about what it means for the Democratic Party, for the broader coalition that makes it up?
So I think you're right that folks were experiencing last night with a lot of nerves, right? I'm in movement, so I'm always thinking about how are we organizing? How are we making sure we're staying focused and calm and confident in what we're building towards? But I do agree with you that folks have been indulgent in some of those nerves, and we got to look at what we know right now. We got to look at what we're going to learn as these numbers come in, as counting finishes. If you look at the New American election eve poll, you look at what the estimated turnout was in Nevada, 250,000 Latino turnout estimated, 700,000 in Arizona, 300,000 in Pennsylvania, right? Those things all get lost when we kind of are only moving in one-dimensional part of how we talk about Latinos in this country.
You know, Dave, one thing I think that has also gotten lost is it's hard to beat incumbent presidents. Just as a historical fact, there's tons of political science literature on this. It doesn't happen a ton. And, you know, the fact that he is going to lose this, like you said, the popular vote margin here, again, that's irrelevant to the Electoral College and it's irrelevant for the constitutional sense. But just in terms of who came out and voted for who and what the national mandate is, I mean, he is probably going to lose, when all is said and done, I think, the popular vote by a larger margin than Mitt Romney did in 2012, which, you know, people view that, I think, election as fairly decisive. So it says something, I think, about his broader political popularity throughout the country.
Yeah, look, you can stack this up, and it's going to be pretty bad for Trump by the end of it. But it's also pretty scary for Democrats in the sense that the margins in the decisive states were really not that large compared to what the eventual popular vote is likely to be. So this gap between the Electoral College and the popular vote, you know, it might be an even greater gap than the one in 2016, even if Biden managed to win Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin by a much larger raw vote margin combined than Trump did in 16.
It's such a great point when you think about, you know, if there's if he ends up winning nationally by 5 million or 6 million votes, somewhere in that neighborhood, that we're still talking about 150,000 voters changing their minds over 3 states, 200,000 voters out of the millions upon tens of millions that were cast. Maria Urbina and Dave Wasserman, thank you both so much. We're coming up on 1 a.m. on the East Coast. Right now, as I speak